Cities, like people, bear the scars of their former names. For the carefree youth who now fill its streets with their mopeds and dreams, it is the noisy, ever-rushing Ho Chi Minh City. For the nostalgic old-timers, their gaze fixed on the past, it is the lush, fragrant Saigon, smelling of jasmine, fried noodles, and patchouli. And for the dusty archives and ancient crumbling maps, it is the mysterious Pre No Cor. But for me, Nguyen Quang Dong, this city will forever be a giant rusted gateway to hell, from which the stench of despair and the icy breath of eternal rest seep out. I fled from there so frantically that I forgot all about pride and military honor, leaving behind only ghosts and my own nearly realized fear. Faster than the Hueys fled the roof of the American embassy in that smoke-choked, gunpowder and human pain-filled April of '75. From a certain angle, you could say I was lucky. The war, that great and merciless Moloch, passed me by, only grazing me with the wing of its fiery breath. I was too young to be a battle-hardened Viet Cong soldier, and too old not to understand the full scale of the horror unfolding around me. After reunification, as the country bleeding out tried to stitch its ragged wounds, people like me had to find our tiny, insignificant place in a new, incomprehensible, and frightening world. My place, by chance or by the cruel irony of fate, was found in the army. And my personal purgatory, my cursed lot, became a giant, half-ruined building that loomed over the district like a monument to foreign vanity and universal grief. At 727 Tran Hung Dao Street, the former presidential palace, the brainchild of the vain millionaire Nguyen Tan Nguyen. Under the French and then the Americans, it teemed with life like a giant ravenous termite mound, consuming human destinies one after another. The Europeans, with their cold, pragmatic indifference to anything beyond their understanding, erected it in 1960. 6 wings, 6 blocks connected by endless passageways, like the labyrinth of the Minotaur, but instead of one monster, it housed hundreds. And 13 floors. 13. We Vietnamese, we whispered in dark corners, tried to warn them, begged them, searching the impassive faces of the foreman. This is the number of the crow, the number of strife, the number that opens a gate for every dark thing that yearns to seep into our world from other unkind dimensions.
They tapped their fingers to their temples, their pale, uncomprehending faces twisting into condescending, arrogant smirks. Children's ghost stories, they'd say, waving us away like annoying flies and return to their blueprints and schedules. But the building, that stone monstrosity, began collecting its bloody harvest from the very first day with an insatiable, demonic greed. I began my eternal, meaningless post on a stifling, humid evening when the air was as thick as seaweed soup and smelled of soot, the sickly sweet scent of a flowering palm tree nearby, and the acrid stench of someone's failed life rotting in the gutters. My unit consisted of 2, me, 20-year-old Nguyen Quang Dong, with an empty wallet and a soul full of vague anxieties, and an old, thoroughly rusted Kalashnikov, its stock scarred with scratches and chips like the face of an old battle-worn soldier. My task was absurd to the point of tears, to guard these ruins from people who were just as poor, hungry, and desperate as I was. The irony was as bitter as wormwood and as sharp as a honed knife. It was on evenings like this, when the sun, like a ball of molten blood, sunk behind the roofs of neighboring houses, painting the sky in crimson and violet hues, that I would meet him, a boy, thin as a reed after a drought, named Locke. His eyes, huge, dark, bottomless, were as empty as fields scorched by Agent Orange. They reflected no hope, no fear, no curiosity, only an all-consuming, indifferent nothingness. The other guards chased him away, might even kick him for good measure, call him a bum or a ghost. But I felt a deep, aching pity for him. He was a shadow, a phantom who materialized in the thickening dusk with one single purpose: to bum a cigarette from me.
One day, one of those tropical downpours hit the city, the kind that falls from the sky with the fury of an artillery barrage, sweeping away everything in its path. We were hiving under the torn, leaking awning of the main entrance, and the water, cold and sharp as needles, lashed at our faces, seeped behind our collars. The world had shrunk to the size of this flimsy shelter and the deafening roar of the water. It was then that Locke, pressing his back against me to shield himself from the spray, told me his story. His voice was a lifeless, monotonous whisper, barely audible under the drumming rain. He was a bricklayer, a good one. Strong hands, knew his trade. Locke showed his own thin, trembling fingers. They called him to work on this site, on the presidential one. The pay was good. That day he was cleaning the cement mixer, a huge one, iron like a tank. Everyone swore the drive belt was off, the switch was dead, all by the book. But when he leaned inside, almost waist deep, to scrape off the dried mortar with his shovel, the monster came alive. Locke fell silent, his fingers clutching the cigarette butt I'd given him minutes before. It growled, a deep, metallic, grinding roar. And then, the first turn, and he screamed. It wasn't a cry of pain, no. It was the sound of absolute, animal, primal terror. The sound of a soul being ripped with flesh and blood from a still living body. The second turn, and the crunch, like someone breaking a whole bundle of dry bamboo sticks over their knee. Only louder, much louder, a crunch that echoed across the whole site. Then silence, only the sound of the rain, just like now. And then they pulled him out, what was left of him. It wasn't my father anymore. It was just a mess of bones and blood. He fell silent, and in the quiet that followed his words, only the same indifferent downpour could be heard. This was just the first, but far from the last terrible tale in this house's collection.
The building devoured its creators with insatiable demonic greed. Electrocutions in improperly disconnected power grids, bricks falling from the roof as if guided by some invisible, malevolent hand, bottomless elevator shafts that swallowed workers whole, their screams echoing up the empty concrete tubes, growing fainter and fainter until they faded forever into the damp, underground gloom. The French, concerned only with deadlines and money, solved the problem in their own way, with their signature colonial arrogance. They hired a local shaman, not out of belief in the spirits of the mountains and rivers, but merely to calm the superstitious, rebellious masses. Grim, persistent rumors spread that from the city hospital they had secretly purchased, or more likely simply stolen under cover of night, the bodies of 4 young virgins who had died of fever, and walled them up in the corners of the foundation to appease the hungry spirits craving sacrifice. Blood and innocent flesh became the fertilizer on which this architectural corpse, steeped in death from its very foundation, grew. And the ritual, in its own way, worked. The construction, though creaking, was completed. Into the shining walls, thoroughly saturated with death, came new masters, confident, loud American soldiers with their chewing gum and Camel cigarettes. And then they too left, leaving behind scorched wings, gaping shell holes, and a whole new legion of restless, yearning ghosts. One of the few who would talk to me, sharing the crumbs of her horror, was an old, hunched-over vendor named Thu. Her face was a roadmap of all her losses, and every wrinkle seemed a separate small story of hunger, bombing, and death notices. "They are everywhere here, son," she whispered, her eyes small and shiny like a frightened bird's, darting nervously across the empty, trash-strewn courtyard. "They never left, never. They whisper on the stairs, talk behind your back, laugh in the empty rooms, a laugh that freezes the blood in your veins, that chills your soul. And at night the worst begins. You can hear gunshots and running and shouts in broken English, as if that cursed battle, that last battle for Saigon, starts over and over again, an eternity without beginning or end. But the most famous, the most heart-wrenching specters of this place are the eternally young, eternally suffering couple. An American soldier, a beardless boy from Kansas or Ohio, and a fragile, porcelain-like Vietnamese girl with eyes full of sorrow. I saw them. Thu's eyes froze for a moment, staring into the void, into a past that was more real to her than the present. They drift through the hallways, holding hands, as if strolling through a park in peacetime. But their faces, son, are filled with such cosmic, inexpressible sorrow that it hurts to look at them. Your heart clenches into a knot. He died somewhere near Hue during that bloody Tet offensive. They told her, and her heart, her fragile maiden's heart, just burst from grief. She couldn't bear it, didn't want to. She found a piece of rope and hanged herself, right there on the staircase that led to his mess hall. Now they are together forever, and their sobs, their quiet, desperate speeches, their whispers travel through the ventilation shafts, like a draft blowing straight from a damp, cold grave. But all these stories, all these ghostly visions and voices from the past, paled, dimmed like morning stars before the sunrise, next to the story told to me by the ancient coffee vendor, as old as Saigon itself. His tiny, weathered stall, cobbled together from rotting planks and rusty iron, was the only island of normality, the only source of warmth and human compassion in this icy, indifferent sea of madness. His coffee, which he brewed on a small, sooty stove, was the best I've ever had. Thick, black as a starless night over the jungle, and incredibly bitter, like the bitter truth of this place itself. He didn't work alone. With him was his adult, hard-working, silent son named An. They had moved to the city from a poor, remote village in the Mekong Delta in search of a better lot, work, a future. and they found it here, at the very foot of this stone giant, this devourer of souls. They worked in shifts, like sentries on an invisible post. The old man traded during the day, under the scorching, merciless sun, and his son, An, took his watch at night, when the city, resting from the daytime heat, began to slowly come alive with different nocturnal sounds.
And on one such night, pre-dawn, quiet, almost airless, when even the cicadas fell silent, hiding in anticipation of the morning, a crying sound came from the upper floors, from that very 13th one. Not a scream, not a shriek of rage or pain, but a cry, persistent, plaintive, infinitely lonely, and so full of hopelessness that your heart turned to an icy lump. "He was a good boy, my Anne." The old man's voice trembled, his hands, accustomed to firmly and confidently holding the heavy coffee pot, now lay helplessly on the counter, sticky from decades of spilled drinks. "He came up to me in our little room on the first floor. His face was worried, his brows furrowed. He said, 'Father, I'll be back soon. I'll check whose child is freezing up there. You can't leave a child alone.' I wanted to stop him, to shout, to grab his hand, to explain that there are no children on the 13th floor. There can't be. That it's not a child, that it's death itself calling him. But my tongue went numb, the words stuck in my throat. He had already rushed out the door, dissolved into the semi-darkness of the stairwell. I heard his fast, confident, living footsteps echoing on the concrete, and that damned crying. They merged into one, and then the footsteps stopped, abruptly, as if someone had cut them." The old man fell silent, his gaze cloudy and lost, fixed somewhere in the space behind me on that fateful day that forever divided his life into before and after. "They never found him, ever. No body, no clothes, nothing. A few other poor souls sleeping in those corridors saw him approach the balcony on the 13th floor, lean over as if calling to someone, reaching, and no one ever saw him again, as if a giant, invisible hand had grabbed him and erased him from the face of the earth without leaving a speck of dust. And since that night, I hear that crying every night. It comes to me when the darkness becomes truly thick. But now I know it's not the cry of a child. It's bait. It's the voice of this place itself. It's hungry, you understand. It's eternally hungry, and it will never be sated. I would like, with all my heart, with all my soul, with every cell of my tired body, to write it all off as collective madness, born of grief, the horrors of war and poverty. But I cannot, because I encountered her myself, the resident, the one that almost became my personal, final, and irrevocable end. It happened during one of my night routine patrols. I was mechanically, almost like an automaton, climbing the endless staircase to the 7th floor. My flashlight, its beam already yellowed and weak, lazily picked out peeling walls, piles of broken bricks and trash, and strange stagnant puddles reflecting the pale, deathly light of the full moon. At the end of a long, arrow-straight corridor flooded with this ghostly, deceptive glow, I saw her, a woman in white. Her dress was not modern, not made of cheap calico, but ancient, of the finest flowing silk, and it hung on her absolutely motionless, without a rustle, even though the draft,
the eternal and only resident of abandoned houses, roamed freely through the floor, chasing dusty whirlwinds and scraps of old newspapers across the floor. She stood with her back to me, and that made it even more terrifying, even more incomprehensible. And then it hit me. The feeling. Not just fear, no. It was an all-consuming, physically tangible wave of apathy, melancholy, and hopelessness. It washed over me like a tsunami, wiping away all other emotions, all thoughts, all memories. Everything I had experienced in my short, uneventful life, childhood hunger, humiliation, the soul-chilling fear of battle, the bitterness of loss, all of it seemed like a child's naive game compared to the bottomless, cosmic emptiness emanating from that motionless female figure. Why fight? Why endure this constant, nagging pain called life? The world is sheer, meaningless torment, and death is the only quiet harbor, the only true peace. Her silence was louder than any explosion, louder than any scream, and it hammered into my consciousness, into my very being, one simple, clear thought. Give up. Just give up. It's so easy. I don't remember taking my rifle off my shoulder. I don't remember my fingers finding the safety, clicking it off. I don't remember pressing the cold, oily metal of the muzzle against the soft, vulnerable spot under my own chin. My fingers, as if belonging to someone else, living their own life, found the trigger, rested on it with a familiar, practiced readiness. There were no thoughts in my head, no images of loved ones, no fear of pain, only the quiet, soothing, tender whisper of oblivion calling me to follow, promising respite.
I was saved by a desperate, hoarse, deeply irritated shout. "Hey, guard! What are you doing? Can't you see the way? Have you gone blind? Have you lost your mind playing with that rifle?" It was that same vendor, Thu. She had come out of her room, stretching, and was on her way to the toilet. Her face was first twisted with annoyance and anger, and then, when she saw me, my stance, the expression on my face, with genuine, animal, primal horror, her cry cut through that beckoning whisper like a knife through butter and tore it apart. I came to, as if doused with a bucket of ice water. My heart hammered in my chest like a mad thing. The stock of my rifle was braced against the rough wall, the barrel against my throat. My thumb had already clicked the safety to the fire position. One bullet was already in the chamber, waiting for its moment. One more instant, half a second, one unlucky twitch of a finger. I shook for days, as if with a malarial fever. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I felt nauseous at the very sight of a weapon. I begged, I practically crawled on my knees to my commander, promised him anything, just to be transferred, anywhere, to the most rotten, remote, boring outpost at the edge of the world, at any cost. My comrades laughed, called me a superstitious kitten, a coward, a weakling. They didn't understand, couldn't, and didn't want to understand. I wasn't running from a boring, meaningless job. I was running from myself, from the abyss that had almost swallowed me forever in that cursed, moonlit corridor. In the end, they sent me away, exiled me, like a dangerous criminal, to a remote, God-forsaken mountain village in the far north of the country, right on the border. Life here is poor, harsh, and devoid of any hint of the comfort I had begun to get used to in the city. But it is life. I breathe deeply. I feel the warm, living sun on my face. I hear the bamboo leaves rustling in the wind. And in that rustle,
There is no ominous, paralyzing whisper. I believe that the gods, or the spirits, or the universe itself gives a person one single chance to be saved when you find yourself on the very edge, when one finger is already loosening its grip on the last support. My chance was on that very balcony, steeped in the sorrow of others and my own, on the 7th floor of the building at 727 Tran Hung Dao Street. And I took it. I didn't look back. I dared not.
Now, years later, I've heard from rare guests from the city that they give tours in this building, in this monument to death, thrill seekers looking for cheap sensations, foolish, naive boys and girls from Europe and America, with their fancy video cameras, silly selfie sticks, and a thirst for adrenaline they think comes without risk. They play at being ghost hunters, brave explorers, not understanding, not realizing the very essence, the very nature of what they are dealing with. They don't understand that some doors, once opened, can never be closed, that some voices, once you start listening to them, you can never silence. They are playing with a place that isn't just haunted by ghosts, like a prison is haunted by inmates. It is itself alive. It breathes, it feels, and it is eternally hungry. And every time, through dozens of retellings, a rumor reaches me about another unexplained disappearance, about some carefree, cheerful tourist suddenly going insane, shouting just one word in a language no one understands, child, or stepping into the void from that very 13th balcony. I remember the soul-chilling, plaintive cry that the old man's son heard, and that quiet, tender, enveloping whisper of eternal peace that sounded in my head, promising an end to all suffering. So listen to me, all of you who have ears to hear and a mind to understand, not to deny. If you value your sanity, your memory, your immortal soul, if you wish to die one day, in the distant future, a natural death surrounded by a loving family, and not become another nameless line on a missing persons list, another legend for the next, even more foolish adventurers, another morsel, a crumb for the insatiable, eternally hungry belly of this place, never, you hear me, never go near the building at 727 Tran Hung Dao Street. It does not forgive curiosity. It does not forget those who left. It remembers everyone. It waits. Always.